Well, good morning, community. Good morning, my fellow executives. Good morning, my stroke and non-stroke people. My guest today is topic is going to be amazing. I really want the entire world to hear this guest because what she's published a book called Surviving 911. So let me bring her online now. Her name is Nancy May. So hold on one second. Let me put Barbara bring her online.
The Stroke of Genius podcast, hosted by brain aneurysm and stroke survivor Aaron Avila, sharing the experiences of survivors and CEOs. This is your destination for inspiration.
Well, good morning, Nancy.
Good morning, Aaron. It is such a joy to be here with you. I really appreciate this time together.
It is really great to have you, and I really am excited about our topic, as you know. I mean, you're first of all, you should introduce yourself properly.
So my name is Nancy May, and I have a background as being a corporate executive and leader in the boardrooms of public companies and working with those folks. But over the years, I also have been a caregiver for my folks. And in that time, I learned that some of the bigger challenges were how do you deal with the issues of 911 when you are 1,200 miles away and mom and dad are in a totally different state. So that's basically figuring out how this all works was part of the research that I did on my own. And ultimately, we've created a book called How to Survive 911 Medical Emergency, which has been researched to, I don't want to say to death, because that's probably not a good acronym to use right here. But in general, we've worked with ER doctors, emergency professionals, paramedics, trainers of paramedics, attorneys, you name it. Everybody's been involved in this particular publication to make sure that, in fact, it actually helps everybody who may go through a 911 situation. Quite frankly, we all have had that experience, or if we haven't, at some point in time, either for yourself, for a child, for a spouse, for a parent, you will have spent at least one instance in the emergency room, I promise you. So, but we go through all the sort of issues of what happens before, how to get prepared, all the way to the very end of getting discharged quickly, what happens in the hospital, and even what happens when the 911 system is down and there is no way to actually easily reach 911 when you need them. There is a way to do so.
You look really awesome. I'm sorry for the feedback. I was getting that going.
It was a little distracting, but that's okay.
I had the YouTube open, and YouTube didn't know it, and it was playing, so I apologize for that.
That's all right. We got it fixed.
This topic is, to me, is kind of close to my heart because obviously I've used 911. I'm a stroke survivor, and if this message, what you and I are about to talk about, everybody in the world should know about it, no doubt. And that really brings me to my first question, and I'm gonna get right into it because I'm gonna have half an hour with you. But in your opinion, do you really need to prepare for calling 911?
Oh gosh, the easy answer to that one is yes. The complex answer is, how do you do it? And just like anything, the being able to have what we refer to as muscle memory when you're in a stressful situation is so critical because you know how to react versus panic. And being able to be in control as much as you possibly can so that things don't get out of control for you or somebody else. So it's critical to know how to call 911 and to be prepared for doing so. For example, one of the very simple things that everybody can do is to make sure that the number is on their house and that the emergency response team can find you. One fascinating little story is that one of the people that helped us with the book is a paramedic trainer. So she trains the top professionals out there who respond to 911. And when I took the book physically to her house to give her a copy of it to say thank you, I couldn't find her house. She didn't have the numbers on her. She didn't have the numbers on her mailbox in her house in a rural community, and she had a long driveway down sort of a wooded path or drive. And I said, Karen, like, what the heck? And she says, everybody knows who I am. I was like, no. Not everybody knows who you are. And in fact, the people who are involved in the system and learning to become paramedics or EMTs are constantly changing, and we need new people in the system. So they may not have known where she was if in fact they needed to call.
I mean, something is basic. You don't really think about it, but something is basic is make sure they can find you.
Very much so. Yeah. Even so, I'll give you another example. If there's an emergency and you are not at home and you don't know physically where you are, one of the first things you can do is when you get a 911 dispatcher is to describe your surroundings. First of all, tell them where you physically are. Are you in, the town that you're in, the cross streets that you're on? If you don't know the cross streets, give descriptions of physical buildings or visual markers that you remember passing before you needed help. And that will help anybody in that particular emergency unit to at least figure out where you are or try to come close to where you are.
The reason this is so important to me, and the reason I'll be sharing this video around as many people as I can, but I personally dialed 911. I survived a brain aneurysm and stroke. But, Nancy, how can we be more prepared? What's the number one thing in this? We didn't talk about this. But what is the number one thing we could do as family members to prepare to call 911? What do we need to do?
So the first thing is you have to be able to know how to dial 911. I mean, that's the easy thing. Everybody thinks dialing 911 is an easy thing to do. Not so much. So if you're dialing 911 on your cell phone and your phone number is like mine, a 203 number, they may not necessarily know that you're in Florida or Kansas City. So you have to know how to talk to the dispatcher immediately once you've got a hold of a dispatcher. You say, hello. First thing you say is, do you have a medical emergency? Do you have other kind of safety emergency? Is it a fire? Is it a medical? Is it some other, is it a break-in? Let them know what kind of emergency you're dealing with so they know what kind of response to send to you. That's key. If they don't ask, let them know right up front. The time is of an issue, especially in a medical emergency. You immediately need to let them know that you need an ambulance and a medical professional to be out by you. The other thing is to, certainly don't panic. That's easier said than done. But if you're prepared to make that call, take 3 deep breaths. Like, don't hyperventilate. Say, do it really fast, but don't hyperventilate because you may be the one who needs a 911 if you pass out. So don't do that. The other is to also listen to the dispatcher. These people are trained. They may be redundant in their calls and in their questions that they ask, but they have specific set and series of questions to ask so that they can get the help to you. It may sound like they're asking stupid questions. Don't worry about it. The other thing is to be prepared by having what's called a file of life. And if you go to howtosurvive911.com, you can get a free file of life. And a file of life is a document that actually prints out, or where you put out all your medical and personal information that's related to you, your history, if you have allergies, if you're on medication, if there are other life-threatening diseases or issues that you've had. Understand the symptoms beforehand, before you've actually had to call 911, so you know how to talk to the emergency response team when they do arrive. But that piece of paper, that one piece of paper, that file of life is so critical. And I'll give you an example. So my husband last year went to the emergency room. I was on my way back from New York helping a friend with her dad's life memorial. And as I'm coming through the security, he calls me several times, and I always I hang up because I'm going through security. Like, don't talk to me. He says, I'm in the emergency room. I was like, oh, okay. He's not supposed to be there. But he brought his file of life to the ER, and the emergency room doctor said, oh my God, this is awesome. Where did you get this? And he said, well, we created it, but there are others out there. We've just taken it and tweaked it and made it a little better. It's a fillable PDF, so you can constantly make updates whenever you need to. You don't need to erase and scratch it out. And you should have at least five of them on hand. One to give to your emergency team that arrives, one to bring with you to the hospital, because in case they lose it, you've got another copy. So you want to give it to the doctors. One to keep on you in case you need it while you're traveling, one in your car, and a backup in your system or at your house in a file. So you've got a backup copy in case you lose it yourself. I don't think you can ever have too many. The other thing is to also make sure that you always have one on your refrigerator. If you don't know how to get, they have these little plastic things that call file of life that you can typically get at, it's like a little plastic holder that's red with magnets on it. And in many cases, EMTs or paramedic fire departments will have them that you can get free of charge. If they do not, the simplest thing to do is take a little plastic sandwich bag, put a red piece of paper in the back, construction paper, and in white pen or ink, say file of life, and stick it on a refrigerator with a magnet, or tape it on if your refrigerator doesn't have that magnetic component, so that it's always visible for anybody who walks into the house in an emergency situation and they know where it is. They will always check the front of the refrigerator for any kind of emergency notice or information. Typical training, that's what happens. Some of people will say, put it in the refrigerator, ICE, in case of emergency. But I'm thinking, so I don't need an emergency response team looking under my frozen turkey for my file of life, which is probably like hidden behind the peas, right? Don't put it there. Keep it easy and quickly accessible.
Well, that piece of information just alone in itself is huge.
Yeah.
Because my poor wife, about 10 years ago, I did down on one meeting. Here was dying on the floor.
Oh.
And, to have that file of life would change her experience completely.
Yeah. I mean, it's simple things like if somebody has dentures and they're in their mouth and you don't know about it, the paramedics come. You want to make sure that they're not choking on them, or that they can bring them with them, or if they have glasses or anything else, if they've had a stroke before and you don't know it, there may have other reactions to medications, or just, I wouldn't call it dementia related, but some sort of cognitive changes in a stressful situation. And that happens a lot. They call it hospital-induced delirium. That can happen at any age. It can happen to teenagers. So in the hospital, when you're constantly being woken up like every 2 hours and you're just trying to get better, the stress factors in your system sort of flare up. And sometimes you get disoriented. And especially in an older person, they'll automatically think it's dementia or Alzheimer's or something going on. Not always the case. It's your body's reaction to stress that ultimately creates this sense of disorientation, not knowing where you are,
Right.
Maybe forgetting what day it is. I mean, goodness, if you're in a hospital room, it's easy for a number of period of days. It's easy to forget where you are. Well, you probably not forget you're in the hospital, but you won't remember what day it is, right? You just have no frame of reference. So make sure that they understand that that's really key in getting better too.
So give the audience some curious, because we keep saying the document needs to be apparent on the fridge.
Absolutely.
What does it contain?
So the document contains basically who you are, your current address, so they know where you live, persons to call in case of an emergency. So if you've got the emergency yourself, you're able to call 911 for yourself, but they don't know who else to contact. At least that information is there. Your primary care doctor, any specialist that you have, if you have medication that you're taking, all the medication, including your vitamins. That's really important, because vitamins and supplements can have reaction to other medications that may be given to you in the hospital, even in an emergency situation. And the interesting thing is that the average amount of time that a doctor uses to make a decision in the emergency room, or pretty much in the hospital in general, is 9 seconds.
Wow.
Right, exactly. I don't want to put my life on the line for a wrong decision in 9 seconds.
Wow, that is so amazing. I want everybody to realize if you dial 911, time is of the essence. Here I was in the brain aneurysm state, and I hadn't had my stroke yet, just a brain aneurysm. But if my wife would have this when we walked in the ER, it would have changed
Everything.
everything. So I
Yeah.
want everybody to realize how critical it is. Number one, buy Nancy's book. Get her book. I'm not trying to fill a book because
That's what it looks
I
like.
think it's the book. But everybody should be reading that. Everybody should be prepared to survive 911.
Oh, wait. That's the goal, right? I mean, the goal of 911 and the 911 responders is to get you to the hospital safely. Now, if there is a situation where you're taking care of an aging parent or somebody and they fall or just fall out of a chair, you can still call 911 to get some help picking them up and putting them in the chair, and you can refuse transport to the hospital. That's okay. I mean, that is your decision. But if there is a life-threatening or some sort of major health situation, they will know, and they will encourage you to go to the hospital as much as you don't want to go because it's a pain in the neck and you think of long waits and everything else and a lot of chaos that happens in an emergency room, especially if it's, let's say, a Friday evening on a weekend, or there's some other activity holiday. So I ended up in the emergency room myself from a car accident many years ago, Super Bowl Sunday.
Oh no!
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
So that was before we wrote the book and before I started taking care of my folks. So I didn't have a file of life, and I'm sure it would have made a big difference at the time.
Huge difference. I want if you're watching this from replay, definitely get the ball of life. Because here we are, we have medical emergency. We got 911 there. We call 911. When they in the ER, we give them the doctors the minutes out the pull of life. And it cuts down so much time. You were telling me before we started on the broadcast, I think it was how our doctor was really amazed, and the staff might be amazed that you have this document. It saves that much time. So do it.
It does. We've got a whole chapter right here on actually what do you do when you're actually calling 911 on the, at that particular point in time. But, one of the key things when you do reach a dispatcher, please immediately let them know whether you have a medical, a fire, or a police related emergency. That way they're not wasting time to get the right people to you quickly.
I saw some piece of goodness me. It's something that you'd forget in your panic.
Right?
Yeah.
What's going on? Yeah, everybody assumes that 911 is for a medical situation. Not always. Right?
Right.
I could be a fire. Well, a fire may not necessarily involve a physical medical situation unless there's a burn, obviously, or major issue at the same time. But they need to know: do they send the fire trucks, or do they send the ambulance and the paramedics?
That's really great, Nancy. So we've had a file of life. We've now in the ER. Is there any ways that we can get faster service or faster care when the ER? Is that that's where
Sure.
the document comes from?
So it's important to know that when you get to the ER, they will quickly assess your situation against others that are there. If you have a heart issue, you're likely going to be put right to the top of the priority list. If you've got a stroke issue, you'll be up at the top of the priority list too, because time is of the essence of when they can, what sort of medication they can do to try and stop those situations with strokes and heart issues. And I'm not a medical professional, but this is what happens out there. If it's a broken limb, you're going to probably be put to the bottom of the situation unless there's some sort of shock situation that might cause other healthcare related issues. But understand that if your emergency husband, he had a broken toe, smashed toe, he wasn't bleeding to death. He was a lot of blood, but he wasn't bleeding to death. So he was not the top of the priority if somebody came in with a heart attack. Right. So you just have to understand where you are in I call it the ER pecking order. The other thing is to make sure that when you're there, some places will typically say, what is all your insurance information? They want all your insurance information. The file of life will have all of that information quickly. It happened with my husband. They said they started going through asking him questions about his medical providers. And he said, here. And they're like, oh my God, this helps us so much. It saved us time. Go to the doctor. So he did. And that made a big difference in the quality and the speed of his care. But then the other thing is that you'll often be asked to sign documents to say that you will pay for the service that is being provided. My personal request is to not sign anything electronically, ask for it to be printed out, read it before you sign it. Because if you are not the person physically that needs the care, and you have no personal relationship in any way to that individual, you may be signing a document that makes you financially liable for their legal bills. Don't do it.
Oh my.
Right. So for example, if you have a parent and you're a POA, sign it as POA. Do not sign, just your name. POA, whatever it is, what your responsibility is for that person.
What is POA require?
Power of attorney is what that is. So your medical or financial power of attorney directive, you have both, or you can have one or the other, or you can have both. But that's something you want to have set up with an attorney well beforehand. Everybody, when they set up their wills, should figure out who is going to be a POA at some point in their life. It's a discussion to have with family members. Very important to have. Because you may not need it now, but later on down the road, you have to figure out when that's going to need to be invoked.
Yeah, so I want to make sure I'm clear on that. So when you're asked to sign documents of the spouse, the child, the caregiver, whatever, make sure you put POA.
If you are the POA, you have to be legally the power of attorney for that individual. But if, let's say, if I'm overseeing the help of a friend who is in the emergency room, I go to the emergency room with a friend, he or she can't sign the document. They say, you sign this. I'm signing a document for their financial responsibility. My name is on that now, so I'm attached to it. Don't do it. The best way to handle that is to have the printed out document. They'll resist because they all want it electronically. Ask for it printed out. Find that one paragraph that says you are responsible for XYZ, cross it out, initial it, date it. Anything that you disagree with on a document like that, you can cross out, you put your initials next to it, and you put the date next to it, which signifies that you do not agree to that particular clause in the contract.
Yes, it sounds silly, but just to let people know out there, I've been last 10 years going to 12. I had my own personal experience. Just the flight alone, a 20-minute flight from where I live to the hospital, $80,000.
Mm-hmm.
The doctor turned to my wife said, I clearly got in the wrong profession because $80,000 for a 20-minute flight, the doctor himself don't. So the point is, don't get yourself legally binding as far as paying someone else's bill.
Yeah.
It gets expensive out there. But, well, God, man, the stomach's
coming.
Well,
the transportation costs are crazy. And I just spoke to somebody the other day who they were traveling and they needed to go to the emergency room for her husband who had, I think it was kidney stone attack or something like that. They didn't know what it was. And the doctor was in the hospital, was outside of their system of care. So they got stuck with this huge bill. Now there are rules that are starting to come into play, to the I forget the exact name of it right now, but it's basically the No Surprise. It's called the No Surprises Act that was invoked in February, so that you should know what those bills are up front and be aware of it. And we could do a whole separate show on that altogether.
Yeah.
But understand what you're being billed for, and you can always negotiate and fight it. It's a pain in the neck, but don't give up. I mean, if you're at a network, fight the bill and see what can be done. In many cases, if there's one doctor in that system that is in network, they should be able to provide the same bill for somebody who's out of network in the hospital. I think there's some things that are being invoked into rules and regulations to try and create these no surprise bills. They're taking some time to ravel through the system, so I can't say exactly what they are, but we're in the process of researching the details on how that works right now.
Well, that's really good advice. I'm going to tell people out there, we have personal experience with this issue. Do take Nancy's advice. Do not just give up and just say, okay, I'll do whatever you're saying. Sign what you want, pay what you want. Don't do it. Fight it. Because we have bills dramatically reduced by 80%.
All you have to do is ask. In some cases, the bill is a lot less if you offer to pay cash.
Yeah, right.
Everything is negotiable. These are big businesses, and you have to understand you are not fighting. You're fighting big business. The system of care is actually an oxymoron, right? It's not a system of care. It's a system of business, and a lot of hospitals, many hospitals, are now owned by public companies. The shareholders of a public company are their customers, not you.
Yeah, that, in the topic of finances and charges, what are ways we can avoid added costs that they do? What are those ways we can avoid them?
Well, the first way is to start asking questions beforehand. Do we really need this? Why is it being done? How frequently do I need to go back? Things like that. But in an emergency situation, chances are first of all, they don't know you. They don't know your medical history, and they're going to do everything they can to try and get you better. Understand that most ER doctors are trained to make sure that you get, it's not that even that you get better, but the emergency room is designed to stabilize you, period. That's it. It's not to cure you. It's just to make sure that you don't die. That's the role of the emergency room, so that they can get you to the people who can cure or make you better. But the emergency room is purely a stabilization mode. That's it.
Yeah, that's really amazing. And I got time's flown by so quick. Right toward the end of the show, it's on half hour podcast. But I cannot stress to people out there, if you're watching this on the replay, you need to realize this is extremely important. This book that she's written can help everybody in the world, in my opinion, that needs
Thank
to
you.
go to the hospital. I think, Nancy, how many people what is the stat of how many people actually go to the hospital or lifetime experience dialing 911? Is a stat on that? Did you understand that?
I'm sorry. Could you say the
Right.
question again? I didn't get it.
In a lifetime of a person, how many times have they dialed 911?
Oh, that's a good question. I really don't know. I'm going to guess at least once in the course
Yeah.
of your life, but you would be surprised how many times people hesitate to call 911 because, I mean, think about it. You think you need help or you don't know. I mean, the first time you've ever had to call 911, it's kind of scary. You don't know whether you should. Should you just get in the car and go to the emergency room yourself? The hesitation factor is so important that literally seconds can save a life or your own life ultimately in in any particular situation, especially calling 911 for yourself. You're bleeding, you don't know what to do, there's an emergency situation. Do I call for help, or can I handle it myself? And most adults think that they can handle everything themselves because we've been trained to be responsible for our situations, right? However, not always. It's don't wait till you end up being sorry is my adage. And worst case scenario, they get there and you really don't need them. That's okay. The emergency responders will not be upset if you really don't need them once they get there, unless it's a social call. And then don't do that.
All right, all right. I've heard of people being like that. They actually,
Yeah, some older, lonely people will do that. And so I'm going to add one more thing, if I may,
please.
because beyond the book, we also have a podcast called Elder Care Success. So if you go to Doing It Best with Elder Care Success or eldercaresuccess.live.
Okay, slow that down a little bit.
So
Elderly,
eldercaresuccess.live.
and that's a weekly podcast you do
No,
personally.
we do it twice a month. It's a relatively new podcast. We have 22 issues up right now, or 22 episodes up right now. But one of the things we just released is what happens when, mom and dad are widowed and somebody comes along and becomes their new love interest and wants to take advantage of them personally and financially.
But this content, and I'm gonna have you back on the show if you would, please, because I think this content you're speaking of is so important for every human being that because they're gonna encounter these situations. This is a real life situation that you're gonna face out there. So
Absolutely. Yep. And if you're in the hospital for an extended period of time, typically a hospital, especially when you're talking about older parents, will want to keep you in the hospital for 3 days. After 3 days, you qualify if they're a Medicaid or Medicare um, recipient or on Medicare or Medicaid, you can get a certain amount of time for, I wouldn't say free, but a certain percentage off in a rehab facility. So they will send you and request that you go to a rehab facility. You probably went to one yourself after a stroke to say, how do you plan to get better so that you can live on your own? That's the goal of a rehab facility, so that you be able to live well on your own without support. And what happened is recently I just saw a post from somebody, and they were talking about their mom that was in a hospital. The hospital wanted to send them to a rehab facility. The hospital knew, and she knew that that rehab facility was not good. They're not all good. A lot of them are not great because they don't have the staffing support and a bunch of other issues that come into play. And she wanted to get her mom to a rehab facility that was closer to her house, that she knew was better, had better ratings, and it would be easier for her to visit and monitor and keep track of her mom. Well, the hospital didn't want to do that. You can refuse transport or discharge at any time. And it's going to be a fight. You're going to have to deal with it. If you can't get to the normal pass of refusing discharge or getting to where you want to, then what you need to do is you need to go up the administration path. Don't stop with the nurse or the head nurse. My feeling is you go right to the general counsel. Don't deal with any of this BS. It's like, get out of my way. Nancy's here. Watch out.
that is so. We experienced that personally in our lives. My wife's kind of, let's say, tenacious, and she's not gonna roll over. You charge her $300 for a band-aid, you're gonna hear about it.
Yeah. And
But
it's exhausting. I mean, she was probably physically and emotionally
yep,
exhausted once it
yep,
was done.
yep.
And it takes a long time to recover because you're so drained from that adrenaline. And that's okay. But you need to be on this fight, and literally it is a fight in many cases, because you are nothing more than a cog in a system. And it's a system, and even doctors will say it's not a system of care, it's a system of business. The good ones that are out there are doing a really amazing pushback on what's happening out there. There are a few that are vocal about it, but it's
I
important to know.
better be prepared. And I'm so thankful you're out there saying, "Hey, be prepared." It does.
Yeah.
You spend just a little bit of money now. get the book, be prepared, or spend thousands and thousands of dollars and not being prepared.
And ask about the doctors that are being put in charge of either yourself or somebody else who's in the hospital that you love and you're monitoring. If you're not happy with a doctor, you have a right to make a change on that doctor. The interesting thing that I recently learned, because there are a number of doctors that I was familiar with down in Florida where my parents were and now where we are, and I was not happy with them. I knew their history was not good. I would give it a -0 if that's possible, a negative number. There was Dr. Death, Dr. Penclicker, the WTF doctor. I mean, like, forget it. I mean, I had a whole list of Tweedledum, Dumb Tweedle, and Stupid Tweedle of doctors nicknames for them. So I spoke to the local hospital CEO who was retiring at some local event. And I said, so what happens with these doctors? Can't you fire them? And he said, unfortunately, we cannot. We have to wait till they retire. And this is a hospital that is now owned by HCA, Healthcare Corporation of America. So I'm not bashing any particular corporation, but just understand that is how the system works. They cannot fire a doctor unless they have countless examples of when a doctor has actually caused a death and documented. And a doctor will never admit and say they're sorry, because if they say they're sorry, that's an admission of guilt.
Right.
So they're very used to or trained how to use certain language when talking to a patient, or a patient's family, when things happen the wrong way.
Well, that's really awesome. Now we're down the end of the show, but I am curious. Please tell the audience how they can get a hold of you in social media. What are your best ways of contact?
Sure. My best points of contact is in Facebook. That's an easy way to get a hold of me. Nancy May is on Facebook. I have a Facebook group called Elder Care Success, which is a private group for those of us taking care of parents or family members. That's open to anybody who's taking care of people. Just answer the 3 questions. If you don't answer the 3 questions, you don't get in. I do that purposely to keep it safe and comfortable for everybody. They can look for me on any of the major podcast platforms, Twitter, Apple, Spotify. That's eldercaresuccess.live to get a subscription to that, but you can get there from any particular podcast scenario. On Instagram, I think it's CareManity 10 that I'm on. I'm trying to figure that one out. I'm learning Instagram, so. And LinkedIn, it's Nancy May. I've got my old board bench is my profile there.
I want to encourage you, if you look on TikTok, you'll see the purchase Nancy's book. Take a look at that. Write it down. Email if you have any questions, but get the book. I know my wife and I give her a copy. But Nancy, we're out of town. I thank you so much for being here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aaron. It's been a pleasure to be here. And I hope that people get the book, not just for me, but for themselves. And howtosurvive911.com, they'll get that free file of life. Take it. It's yours. Do what you want with it, but get it and use it.
I love it. All right. Everybody have a good day. Thank you, Nancy.
Take care. See you later. Bye-bye.